Good evening, Ulhas. How are you?
Hi, good evening. Good, great, yeah, wonderful.
Wonderful to catch up with you as always.
Yeah, likewise, same here.
I know, we've spoken more in the lockdown, during the lockdown than we usually speak. So I think that's the only advantage that the lockdown has given to people, that you've been able to connect more at peace.
Right, yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So Ulhas, I think today I would like to, we've had a lot of questions from people around, how do we move from, being a corporate executive to starting your own business, to becoming an entrepreneur, and eventually to become a social entrepreneur. I have had that journey myself, and I have had my learnings, but, you've had far more experience and vast, depth and width of the experience. I would love to, hear more from you, for audiences and for me as well. So my vested interest today was that I will get to hear a lot from you and learn a lot from you. So if you were to, look at somebody who's just transitioning, from a corporate career into getting into an entrepreneur, and then, probably migrating into social entrepreneurship kind of a role, what do you think is, what do you think are the common things, and what do you think are the differences? I think these are questions a lot of people have. Should I do this? Should I do that? And will I take away some learnings from my corporate world, or will I have to unlearn a lot? If you could touch on those things, it will be really nice.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I think it's in my experience, it's a huge transition. Speaking for myself, I spent almost 20 years working in the corporate sector, classical leadership roles, large organizations, systems, and all of it. And then I went on to do my own business entrepreneurship for a couple of years, and then another couple of years of social entrepreneurship. I was fortunate enough, to part of it is choice, part of it is accident, that that I was able to do all the three, and especially do the two transitions.
Right.
So I think one of the biggest challenges that you face, especially while making a transition from corporate to entrepreneurship, is that they're two different animals entirely. So other than your qualifications, your knowledge, and some of the functional domain and skills that you would have acquired, I think the kind of mindset, the attitude, the personality traits and the attributes that you require to be successful in a corporate enterprise versus a social or a business entrepreneurship, I think are quite different. It's not that you don't use it they are not like exclusive, but I think the emphasis or the focus on those personality traits or attributes, all the three are quite different. And that's where I think the mental challenge of coping up, dealing with things, trying to see how do you introspect continuously and keep making those changes from time to time, is I think where the biggest challenge is. So it's a mind game. And if you remember, we were having this conversation a couple of days back, and you get this point of saying, it's all in the mind. And that's true. It's not at a philosophical level. I think that's the reality. It is indeed a mind game. The rest stays the same. You are what you are. You have your skills, your experience, your background, you have qualifications, you have your stature in the industry or in your networks, and that is all well respected and regarded in any case. So I think as an opening comment, that's what I could sort of observe.
So if I were to say that, I've got 10 years of experience in the corporate world, and I somehow come up with a good business idea, and I say, this is something I want to launch. What do you think I should first pen down, think about before I jump into it? I see a lot of people, either they just sit on the fence and not jump, or some people who just jump and then start thinking. So what do you think we should somebody should do when he's moving from a corporate executive role to starting his own venture kind of a role. And I think one of the biggest things I have seen, so my two bits here is, the one thing I always tell people from my side is, get out of the mode of salary.
Yeah.
Don't. So if you're used to seeing that salary every first of the month, and suddenly when it vanishes, you're completely, you don't know what's come and hit you. So that's one thing I always tell people, write that down and remember this. It's going to be a long, long journey. So what are the things that you think one should keep in mind before he jumps from especially I've seen people, asking this question from very well established organizations, and they're at that 8 to 10 years kind of experience, kind of a tenure in their lives, in their careers. What do you think they should do?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. I think the most important thing is that I think your own commitment and passion. So I think Samir, the point is that once you've kind of made up your mind to do what you want to do, it's important to take the plunge and dive deep into what you set out to do or what you believe is your passion. Because
right.
If you keep getting conflicted between your corporate job and your venture of your dreams, it just doesn't work that way. You can't be 50% in a job and 50% in entrepreneurship, and someday you have had a great day at the office and then you feel, let me postpone the venture. And the very next day, you've had a very bad day, you're down in the dumps and you feel I should resign right away and start my venture. I think I went through that. And finally, one of my mentors, he told me, he said, listen, better make up your mind. Either you want to do the venture or you don't want to. If you don't want to do it, stop talking about it and dreaming about it and get on with your corporate life. Otherwise, you got to decide the date and just plunge into it. And then you want to burn all your bridges with your corporate life and give your 100% of your time and dedication for the venture that you set out to do. So I think this is it, taking that plunge and taking it head on, and 100% is extremely, extremely critical. It cannot be a halfway house. I think that doesn't work because you are then constantly conflicted and you're just not going to be able to do justice to what you set out to do.
Yeah, so Ulhas, very, very good point you touched upon. You need to burn all the bridges. You need to it has to be clean cut. Now, could you elaborate a little more on the clean cut and where people, I think this is one place where a lot of people face challenges. It's difficult to let go of these things. How do you do that? I mean, how did you say that, okay, I'm now not going to think like a corporate executive when you've already done that for 10 years? I believe it's more difficult to unlearn than to learn those new skills. How do you do that, and what do you recommend people should be doing?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think to be able to understand that, probably one of the things, we could really talk about is to see what are the typical characteristics of a corporate life, and so if you see large organizations, established places, and you've been through it, I've been through it myself, there's really that you have systems, you have technology, you have the big brand hello right behind you in whatever you set out to do, you have the resources. There is fair amount of stability and predictability. I mean, I can't say everything is guaranteed, but in large organizations, there is fair amount of that safety net which is always there. But along with that also comes the whole challenge of bureaucracy, lack of freedom. There is also the decision-making process, which all said and done is a bit slow, right? Because there are many loops to be crossed before anything gets ever decided. So there are silos, there are compartments, and innovation is obviously slow because large organizations have their own. It's like a big ship, right? If it has to turn, then it needs its own radius and its own time.
Right.
It's not like a small boat where you can just row your way out of a problem. So I think when we look at these attributes, essentially, when you're making that transition, mentally, I think one needs to get comfortable with the idea that some of these things need to change, and they need to change very dramatically, because
right.
What is positive in a corporate culture is not so positive when you're trying to do business entrepreneurship, and really really vice versa. So really so I think the thing that really becomes very important then is that you need to be getting comfortable with the idea that it's okay to be a little unsettled. Everything doesn't have to be sort of established and follow a routine, and there's a procedure and a technology and a system for doing everything. So one needs to get comfortable with the fact that things are going to be unsettled. You don't know, you're in uncharted waters. You really don't know which way you are headed. Second is the willingness to get really hands-on. I mean, it's like, starting from buying your own Xerox paper to doing whatever, and whatever position you might be holding in a corporate setup, where the whole, trappings of the power and the position and the power of hierarchy that we all experience and we get used to it, is something that's very, very difficult to let go of. And I think that's the biggest area where I think we need to really prepare ourselves or brace ourselves to facing the reality that in a business entrepreneurship, you really have to get extremely hands-on and do whatever it takes to make things happen. And resources are hard to come by. You will always run into a lot of hit and run situations. Things are not very predictable. Your products and markets are unknown. Lack of data is also very clearly a problem. So I think this is the most important part, that getting comfortable in a situation where you're in uncharted waters. You have no way of predicting which way it will go, and still keep your focus very strong in terms of what your priorities are, what you're going to do, is I think one of the most important shifts that we need to make in our own mindset. And from being somebody, you have to be ready to accept the fact that you are a non-entity, because as a startup or as a no-name company, or a no-name brand, I mean, nobody's going to call you up and seek you out. You have to go and seek out people, and I think this is a feeling that I think it takes a while. It's easy. I think we're talking about it. It's not something which happens easily. I mean, it took me a good 3 to 6 months to really come to terms with the reality of how these two things are very different.
Yeah, I know, and I think this is very, very difficult. I remember in my last corporate assignment, I used to work with Standard Chatered Bank, senior person in the organization, managing the recruitment function, and moving from there to starting your own venture was a big shock. And like you rightly said, it takes 3 to 6 months for somebody to, for your mindset, as much as you may want to be prepared for it, thinking that you're prepared for it and being prepared for it are two very different things. So I think that's, very good point you touched upon here. Now let me add another, another aspect to this. So this is now jumping from corporate to your own business or to becoming an entrepreneur. Now, what about the next transition to a social entrepreneur? Now that's something which is very different, I believe, from even being an entrepreneur. And how do you manage this? So I would love to hear from somebody who's been, at point A, B, and C, all three places. And this is something that that not too many people can say that they've done.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, and I think moving from corporate to business entrepreneurship to social entrepreneurship, I think you're just making things more and more difficult for yourself, because between the business entrepreneurship and the social entrepreneurship, I think everything gets really worse. The whole unpredictability, the lack of a clear landscape or a lack of a clear vision, and everything becomes even more vague. Resources become even more scanty. Finding the right kind of people or the right kind of talent to do what you want to do is also a challenge. So you face huge issues of skill metrics. If you remember, we used to use that in the corporate very strongly. So there's no doubt of people with willingness in the social sector, because there are people who are driven by a certain cause, or who are fascinated by a certain purpose, and therefore they are in it. But they just don't have the skills to make an enterprise happen in a social context. And I think that's the biggest challenge, in terms of how do you convert these people who are willing but do not have the skills to really make things happen. So finding the right kind of talent. I think data points are even more vague. At least in a business enterprise, you might find some data points. You may find some sort of context somewhere. But I think in a social context, I think it just gets even more difficult. Capital, of course, is very hard to come by. But I think the biggest difference between the two is that because I think the similarity between corporate and business on entrepreneurship is that business is, and the commercial aspects of it, including the financial aspects, are still a very, very common thing. I think the models are pretty much similar. But
Ulhas, I would like to just want to touch upon another point, because you asked. So I would like to ask you this question, which means, are we saying that the mindset of a social entrepreneur is very different from the first two? And is that a challenge that you see that people need to? So would you say that you need to have a kind of a mindset to pick up social entrepreneurship, and it's not meant for everybody? And if it is meant for somebody, how do you know it is meant for you?
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm glad you interrupted me, I think, and brought back on track. I think there are two things which are very, very different in social entrepreneurship as compared to working in a corporate or in a business entrepreneurship situation. And those two are, first and foremost, is the profit aspect. I think there is enough clarity in our minds that when you're doing a business entrepreneurship or corporate, you exist for a profit. I mean, the enterprises have to deliver profit, without which, it's not really something which is going to work. So I think one of the conflicts that most of us go through when we are doing social entrepreneurship, should I be making money at all because I'm working for a social cause? And I think that's a huge conflict which many of us find it difficult to resolve. I found it, frankly, to give you an example, very, very difficult to resolve it, because when I got into social entrepreneurship, I got into the microfinance sector. And when I got into microfinance, it was still the not-for-profit microfinance as it existed in those days, run by NGOs and foundations and not-for-profit companies and stuff like that. I think the profitable part of it, or microfinance companies becoming financial institutions, was not there around that time. I think those seeds were just being sown. And I personally found it extremely trying and very difficult to put myself in a situation to say, I mean, I am here to work for the poor. How can I make a profit? And I think that's a huge conflict. And I think if someone cannot resolve it, to say that, there is value out of making profit in a social entrepreneurship at a value level. Okay, it's not about any kind of logic or rationale or anything of that kind. I think it's very difficult to make that transition. And I personally found it extremely difficult to make that transition, especially in the context of microfinance, because I just couldn't understand if microfinance is going to become like commercial banking. I mean, what the hell am I doing here? Kind of a thing. And that's a conflict which I found very, very difficult to, I think, resolve. I think the second factor which differentiates these very strongly, and there is no commonality here, is, the whole purpose of it. I think social enterprises, whether they are for profit or not for profit, are far more driven by a certain purpose or driven by a certain cause. Whereas a business entrepreneurship or a corporate is not so much driven by these. So I think unless you are very resolute and you have a very long-term passion and a commitment for the cause for which you want to get into a social entrepreneurship kind of a venture, I think one should get into it. So I think these are the two factors which I think which need to be resolved in our own minds before we make up our minds to get into any kind of social entrepreneurship. the rest of the factors are not very different. I think it's just that the degree of intensity is very different. So they're all present in some form. For example, talent. I mean, it's tough to find talent in any place. But I think compared to a big corporate, you know it as well as I do, it's tougher to find it in a business entrepreneurship, and it's even more difficult to find it in a social entrepreneurship. But I think profitability and the purpose and the vision, or the cause for which you want to do social entrepreneurship, I think these two issues have to be very clearly resolved. And to be honest, I found it very difficult to resolve that issue in my mind, especially the profitability one. So I think that those are the two difficult levers to really address.
Ulhas, another question. Now, typically there's a point of time where people do this transition. Somebody who's a middle management person who moves on, and sometimes it's senior people who move on with about 20 years of experience to start their own venture. And so one of the biggest problems that I faced myself personally was that when you become an entrepreneur, the buck stops there. The buck stops with you. What are the typical leadership challenges? And especially you are the organization. At the end of the day, the way you visualize your organization, the way you visualize your cause, and more so in the social entrepreneurship, in the social entrepreneurship side, that how do you as a leader face those? Because you've never been truly. So if I had 8 or 9 years of experience, I was not a true leader in terms of managing the entire thing. In a large organization like where we all have worked. So it's like elephant. Somebody can see the ear of the elephant, somebody can see the tail, somebody can see the trunk, but nobody can see the entire elephant. How do you say that I should start seeing the entire elephant? And the moment you see the entire elephant, the challenge and the animal becomes very different. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very, very powerful question, and I'll share my insight. So I think 2-3 things become extremely important. I think when the buck stops at you and you have almost unlimited freedom or empowerment to do what you want.
And that's dangerous.
Yeah,
dangerous also.
Yeah, it's dangerous, and then you start realizing how life is good in the corporate sector. Because you have someone else to go to or pass the buck to. So I think, but I think it's a big positive. I think it just gives you, that feeling of empowerment. It just gives you that feeling of being in control. It also, I think, gives you immense inspiration and motivation that I am in charge,
right,
and I own this piece, and I have no one else to go to complain. Or even for that matter to go and sort of crib about something. So I think it's how you take it, and I think if one takes it in this spirit, in a positive sense, I think it's not such a big issue to resolve. I think the bigger the other thing that to do is that when you're doing in a corporate setup, as I said earlier, we are more focused on doing our piece. I think the example that you gave rightly, so you're paying, you're a cog in the machine, however senior you might be in a large corporate. And I think one of the things that I think where the transition needs to happen is that, your willingness to unlearn and your willingness to embrace all parts of the organization and trying to get into them yourself and learn it. If you are, for example, if you're a human resources guy, you need to get into the business operations, the finance, and marketing and everything else. And therefore, I think this enthusiasm and willingness to get into every aspect of the organization and trying to learn from others, with others, alongside others becomes, I think, extremely important. And therefore, once you learn the entire picture, I think then life becomes more easier. But if you remain in a siloed attitude, which is what we are most of the time forced to do in an organization, because boundaries are clearly drawn. I think it's a big challenge and a big barrier to cross. So I think being open to learning and getting across to various parts of the organization becomes very important. And once you do that, and then that coupled with this feeling of empowerment that I am in charge, I think should sort of see you through. The only other challenge which is beyond your control a little bit in a entrepreneurship situation is if you have other partners and co-founders and people like that. And I think that's a tough one to deal with when you have co-founders working along with you, because in a corporate setting you have clearly set hierarchies. And irrespective of relationship, somebody can put his foot down and say, this is how it needs to be done, and everybody has to fall in line. In a co-founded company or in an enterprise, it's very, very difficult. You might have somebody appointed as a CEO, but the rest of the co-founders also, if they're coming at the same time, have this feeling that, he's just one of us. So it's probably first among equals, but is he really the CEO in the genuine sense? And I think that's a tough one to really resolve. And I think if you have partners working, I think working out those equations, relationships, and protocols, I think becomes extremely, extremely important. If you go back to the history of entrepreneurship, I think one of the biggest challenges of business entrepreneurship is inability to manage founder and co-founder relationships. And that's where people have parted ways, etc., etc. So I think that's the big one. And that's where I think your own maturity level, leadership level, ability to communicate, willingness to engage with others in a dispassionate manner. I think some of these skills, I think, really, really come in very, very handy. But that's, I think, the most important make or break piece in a business entrepreneurship situation. And it is clearly linked to what you pointed out right in the beginning, that you have nobody else to go to because you are in charge. Well, I remember when we were running our business venture, we had some issues and we went to our investor and said, look, we have this issue. The investor said, I don't understand your business. It's for 4 of you to resolve it. I have funded you. That's the end of the story. I mean, there's no more help I can give you. It's your company to run it and resolve the issue, and don't come back to me on anything other than funding. So, that's where we really get. That's interesting. I think, but yes, it is a challenge that I think which it needs to be sort of needs to be dealt with.
So, what do you think are the you touched a very good aspect about it. These are the toughest situations. I think the softer skills are the toughest ones to manage. When you're dealing with co-founders. What do you think are the key learnings and takeaways for leaders in these kind of journeys? This entire thing of having co-founders, and sometimes you would have worked with your co-founders in an organization where you rightly said, where your roles were structured very well. You're doing A, I'm doing B, you're doing C, and now when you become co-founders, everybody is doing A, B, and C, and your journeys are so intertwined. What do you think are the key learnings from from your journey that you had?
Yeah, so I think let me sort of frame my response in 2 ways. I think first let me try and touch upon a few important leadership skills that I think we all need to work on if you're doing business or social entrepreneurship, and then I will take on the other question of the co-founder relationship management. I think on the first part, I think
Ulhas, your voice is again kind of breaking.
Yeah, so I think what's important really is that patience, resilience, and completely sort of determined focus. I think these 3 things are extremely, extremely important if one has to see oneself through through an entrepreneurship journey. Willingness to constantly experiment, try out new things. Certain things will fail. There is always a trial and error method, but all the time looking out for a variety of experiments and ideas to play with. But very quickly you need to decide which ones to keep and which ones to throw out, so that you're not constantly playing around with things for all times to come. So I think this process of iteration keeps going, and I think this is something which is very important. Then I think taking pit stops, because I think one of the challenges of an entrepreneurship is that the whole empowerment piece and the passion can sometimes result into obsessions.
Yeah.
And you know the difference between being obsessed and having passion is that when you get obsessed with something, you will then start making all kinds of mistakes because then we're not willing to really step back and make changes when it is really, really necessary. So I think taking these pit stops during your journey and introspecting as to what are we doing right, what are we not doing right, what course corrections we need to make, whether collectively or you as an individual, I think becomes extremely, extremely important. And that's where I think spending time on yourself and with your other co-founders, if you have them, becomes a very, very important aspect of this journey. And therefore, these pit stops are absolutely, absolutely essential. And along with that is also, I think, a need to have some sounding boards and mentors. You know, people in whom you can confide in. And I think having somebody like that to be alongside you, who will not interfere in what you're doing, but somebody who will just walk along with you and be a sounding board and also pray for you sometimes. I think becomes extremely, extremely important. And I think the last point that I would say is you need to constantly look out for people, ideas, and money, because these are the three things which are always in short supply. And in entrepreneurship ventures, whether you're social or business, nobody is coming to provide you any of it on their own. Therefore, being in constant quest and search for these three things, I think becomes very, very pivotal for for success of any venture of this kind.
Right.
Then let's come to the co-founder piece. Okay, I think that's
what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to come back to.
That's the tough one, I think, to handle. And some of my own experiences have been that, while personally some of us remain very good friends and maintain very good personal relationships, as even though you're working alongside, I think it becomes difficult to maintain that same level of personal equation when you are co-founders in a company. And I think what tends to happen is we are all bred differently. Everybody's ego positions are very different. Power orientation is very different. Our experiences of the past are very different. And therefore, I think what needs to happen really is that besides your own internal communications, etc., but which is again a matter of whether you want to do it or you don't want to do it. And sometimes if two individuals are at loggerheads, it's very difficult for them to get to talk to each other on their own. I think it's very important that in co-founded companies, people are able to establish right in the beginning certain protocols in terms of how decision making will happen in a company. And if co-founders and founders are not able to make important decisions on matters of capital or human resources or business models, etc., how do you bring in the board members or the investors and other stakeholders in a very dispassionate manner to sort of resolve those issues so that the company starts to move, continues to move forward? I think those protocols, and I think that's where we can bring back our learnings from the corporate sector very strongly into the way business, smaller enterprises are run, because corporates are very good at these things in terms of evolving these processes. So I think putting these processes in place becomes good, because then if there is a tussle or a difference of opinion which cannot be resolved, some of these methods come in very, very useful, and then the entity moves forward, because the entity not moving forward is in nobody's interest. You are also going to lose out very heavily in the process. So that's, I think, those things need to be established early in the game, and hopefully that helps.
Great. Ulhas, any last words as so let me ask you a question like I am in the corporate world. Last words of, if you were to give it out in 3 bullet points, what are those top 3 things people should think before they jump one ship to the other? So, uh, from an corporate executive to an entrepreneur to a social entrepreneur, top 3 things that you think one should keep in mind, just 3 bullet points, and from values, attributes, whatever.
I think first and foremost is, don't get into business or social entrepreneurship because you're fed up of doing a corporate job. I think that's a very, very bad reason for doing doing the other two. Second,
Right.
is really that I want to do something different or try out something different in life because I have enough financial leverage in life, is another bad reason. Because
Right.
end of the day, so unless you have a clear vision in terms of what you want to do, I think this is not really something that it's not a problem for solving your boredom, for which you need to jump into it. The third part is, I think, willingness to get into very uncharted and uncertain times for many, many years to come.
Right.
Is, I think, the most important mindset that we need to be prepared for, and that's where I strongly draw upon our common hobby of mountaineering and trekking, where
Right.
you are constantly challenged by dangers and uncertain situations and unpredictable weather and what have you, and it's your mindset which sees you through, right? Besides your physical fitness. So I think this whole willingness to really jump into this, the very clear idea that nothing is going to work the way I want it to be, or the way I am seeing it now. I think if you have that mindset, certainly this is something which it's worthwhile doing, and one should go for it whole hog and jump into it right away.
Thank you so much, Ulhas. It was lovely talking to you. I've taken a lot of things from this, and I'm going to use a lot of these points and that you've given in my own enterprise. And I'm sure the people who are listening to us have also had a great time listening to the tips that you've given to people. Appreciate your time today.
It's been wonderful speaking to you, Samir. But before we end, I have a question for you. I think, like me, you've done your journey, so maybe there is something in it for all of us also to learn, for me as well as for all those who will listen to this webinar. So, is there something that you want to share in terms of how has it been for you, and what it takes to really make this transition successful?
I've been an entrepreneur just for about 10 years, and I think 10 years is still a very short time to be an entrepreneur. I believe there's so much to learn every day, but I could a lot of ideas that you said, they resonate so well. And I wish I met you when I was starting my journey. I've made my share of mistakes, but one thing I've learned, we have to start looking at mistakes as commas and not as full stops. You have to start looking them as, it's a bump in the journey. You'll keep making mistakes because you know for a fact, and like you rightly said, when you start, for a fact you're getting into uncharted territory. You're getting into, when you get out of your comfort zone, the opposite of comfort is discomfort. You are going to have discomfort, and I think that's my biggest learning, to understand and adapt, that things are not going to be as predictable. Things are going to be volatile. You are the person, there's nobody you can look up to. You can look up to mentors and everybody, but at the end of the day, you have to walk your own path. Nobody can do that for you. So whatever decisions you take, a lot of I have made so many bad decisions, but all I can do is regret those decisions and learn and move on. But there's nothing more that I can do about it. You can't, if you don't do well in a job, you get fired, you still have a resume and you can go and get another job. But you're so highly invested in not only, and you may not be highly invested only monetarily, you're highly invested in the entire idea, the concept, the brand, whatever you're doing, that you believe that, you have to make this work. And when you have to make this work, with all the constraints together, I believe, it's a very potent combination. It keeps you going. It keeps you going in night. One thing I've taken away, I'm going to start doing some of these pit stops, which I don't do usually. I think those pit stops are very important. And, I think as all of us as entrepreneurs, we reach a point where we believe that if you don't stop a little or slow down a little, you'll burn out. Because there's so much, 24 hours is less for an entrepreneur. I think that's been my learning, my journey. But, I think your conversation today has, given me a lot of things to think back and think. And really grateful for your time today.
Yeah, so maybe we can end on a small quote, and which again I'm drawing from our climbing and various trekking experiences. So there's a very interesting quote which is sort of imprinted in my mind, and it says something like this: standing at the foothill, I look up, and I can see the peaks whisper. It is always further than it looks.
Yeah.
It is always taller than it looks. And it is always harder than it looks. So climb up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ulhas. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you, Samir.
Same here. Absolutely wonderful today.
Likewise.
Great. Thank you, guys. I think it was amazing. मेरे लिए ही it is both sides से. I think it was a very, very interesting. And ये reverse ये मुझे last वाला बहुत अच्छा लगा. It's nice to.
I think this only happens when it is free flow. So you're not prepared and it comes out naturally.
Yeah.
Summit की जो sir ने बात बोली थी ना, there is this concept called a false summit. What happens is, you go, and I still remember, I was doing the Everest base camp, and in the morning at about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, you need to leave from the last point, Ship, to go and climb to Kala Patthar. Now, when you go to Patthar, Kala Patthar has a false summit. So you keep seeing that, you say, "Arey, aa gaya." And then you see there's another, you feel it is there, it is not there. And which is what Ulhas touched upon. It's brilliant. And I think that's what happens in our journey as entrepreneurs. Ye aa gaya and wo aata nahi actually.